Today on America's Court with Judge Ross.
I looked down at the placemat, and on the placemat it has a depiction of a picture from the 1800s. And in the picture there's a mob of white people, and in the corner it has the execution and lynching of a black male. And it says in the bubble print as if it's a cartoon, well, only thing I said is I don't like gumbo.
In my courtroom, it's about equity and fairness. You want him to pay $628?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, knock my socks off. Justice should be more than just some foreign concept. I actually want you to learn something. The law talks about something may in fact be true, but can they prove it? And that's what's tough.
Fair, firm, compassionate. This is America's Court with Judge Ross. Norman Lamar claims he and his family were made fun of, and he felt it went too far. He's suing Walter Cowan in the amount of $5,000. Mr. Cowan claims that making fun of his customers is part of his brand.
All parties been sworn, Your Honor.
Thank you, Deputy Thomas. And when we have these cases dealing with race, they're a little touchy. They're a little uncomfortable sometimes, and yet I think it's important that we talk about these things because this is what's people are struggling with. And I know, Mr. Lamar, that you were very upset about your experience.
Yes, sir.
And it was particular for you as an African-American man that the experience at the restaurant resulted in you now wanting Mr. Cowan's business to compensate you $5,000.
Yes, sir.
Let's talk about what happened when you arrived at the restaurant, sir.
Well, basically, Your Honor, I was on my way to a family vacation in the summer, last summer, with my wife and my 2 kids. On the way there, we decided to stop at Mr. Cowan's restaurant.
Any particular reason why you waited so long to file the case, sir?
Well, Your Honor, I tried on my own to deal with the situation as far as the trauma that was caused to my wife, to my kids, and also to myself through church, through outside organizations. But it's got to a point where I need more assistance with it. My daughter has nightmares at night. My son seems to have like an anger management problem now. He doesn't even associate with some of his friends anymore from this experience.
And you feel all these things are attributable to the experience you had while you were at Mr. Cowan's restaurant?
Absolutely, Your Honor.
Mr. Cowan, how long have you had this restaurant, sir?
This restaurant's been around for the last 3 years, but I've been in the restaurant industry for 5. I have multiple concepts across multiple states. And
let's talk about when you mentioned the word concept, and this is actually a concept establishment and a concept eatery. And then the concept at this particular restaurant is what?
The concept of this particular restaurant is such that the wait staff uses more of a humor-based service, whereby we interact with the customers and patrons on a much more comedic level.
Yes.
At some point, and oftentimes poking fun. Mm-hmm. So while Mr. Lamar here, obviously did not have a pleasurable dining experience based on his account.
The goal is to make people laugh and be silly and not take themselves too seriously.
Sometimes that line can tend to be ridden a little bit, but at the same time, based on everything that Mr. Lamar was presenting with his case, it's the whole is not equal to the sum of its parts.
Did you know that this was a restaurant that wasn't just you have a hostess or someone that has you seated, but everyone's sort of in character and everyone's on and everyone's silly and it's kind of a lot of frivolity? Did you know that?
Well, Your Honor, my kids' friends recommended the restaurant. All right. And they did mention that, it's a different type of restaurant, mm-hmm. but the humor that they talked about was humor that wasn't offensive. Okay. Humor that wasn't racial.
The challenge is that what some folks find harmless, other people are like, I can't believe you said that. And that's really what we're dealing with here, because the humor that you experienced, you didn't see what the joke was.
Well, Your Honor, if I could show you the evidence that I have of this humor.
Well, before you show me, though, but tell me, what exactly was it that set you off?
Okay, so basically, Your Honor, we went into the restaurant.
Yes.
They brought us in, and they set us in the center of the restaurant. Okay. The waiters came over, and the humor that he speaks of, it started off immediately. They were rude. They took the silverware, they tossed it at us at the table. They balled napkins up and they threw it at us. And I'm like, okay, that's kind of funny. That's
Okay.
totally different than what you normally
I'm
deal
smiling
with.
just hearing you
Right.
talk about it.
You would think it started
Yeah.
being funny, and then it went totally left after that.
Okay.
They brought out these hats. They were paper hats, a little abnormal the way they looked. And I know this may sound crazy, but they kind of resembled like a Klan hood almost to me. So for
Now,
me,
that's not so funny.
Coming up on America's Court.
and then the other hat that they put on my daughter, it basically said that I'm just a little jungle bunny.
Okay. Stop.
Closed captioning provided by. If you'll be in the Los Angeles area and want to bring your case to court, call 1-888-552-6878.
The Bissell Crosswave vacuums and washes your floors at the same time. Dry messes, wet messes, it even works on area rugs. The multi-surface Crosswave releases just the right amount of clean water in Bissell formula. The brush roll has microfibers that mop and soft bristles that gently scrub and sweep away debris, while powerful suction pulls the dirty water into a separate tank. To see it in action and get a special offer, go to BissellCrosswave.com. Bissell, home to a deeper clean.
This is America's Court with Judge Ross. This is America's Court with Judge Ross. America's Court is back with the case of Norman Lamar, who is suing Walter Cowan for racial discrimination.
Obviously, me even being an African-American man, if I look at a hat and it says to me, that's kind of like a Klan hat, I'm not going to find that humorous, although I may be predisposed because I'm an African-American man. But I would imagine that you're not trying to lose business from any particular sector, so
Clearly.
Your thought wasn't that that's how it could be perceived.
In fact, I have examples I can provide of these
Okay,
hats. if I
let me
may.
see that, because we're talking about the hats.
Right.
So let's start with the hats.
So Your Honor, if
Well, let me see what Mr. Cohen has.
Stuff also?
Okay. So the wife is wearing something that says retired pole dancer.
Correct.
And then he says, my wife calls me Speedy. And these hats, they're not necessarily Klan-like, but I understand why you would go there.
Well, the hat they put on me, Your Honor, it said, I'm here with Mammy, and it had an arrow pointing at my wife. And then the other hat that they put on my daughter, it basically said that I'm just a little jungle bunny.
Okay. Stop. That's challenging. Let's talk about the issue of the term mammy. Are you familiar with that term from a standpoint of it being a derogatory thing that African Americans would not find humorous?
I completely agree, and I'd also like to submit that the intention, after interviewing the wait staff, the management at the establishment, the reports that I were getting back was that the intention was for it to say, I'm with my mommy, and that it was really, in fact, a handwriting error.
You mean instead of it being looking like an A, it should have looked more like an O?
An O, correct.
Was it, because I'm looking at these examples, and these are in, they're not cursive. So was this person in writing in the cursive and made it look like an A instead of an O?
That's what we gathered from our internal investigation.
Is that
Well, Your
what you...
Honor, I have pictures right here that's very clear
yes,
that
okay.
you can see.
Yes.
Thank you.
Let me see.
And if you notice from the pictures, it's kind of pretty clear. Now, he's saying
Now
that,
here's what you're saying. You're saying it's clear, but as I look at the writing, I can see the interpretation being mammy or mommy.
But Your Honor, where I'm getting my point from is that not only did it say that on my hat, subsequent to the one that's on that my daughter is wearing, how can you have a writing error that says, I'm just a little jungle bunny?
Okay.
And coming up on America's Court with Judge Ross.
And when I stood up to pull the waiter to the side to tell him how offensive it was, instead of him going to get the manager like I asked, he started beating his chest like he was a gorilla, like he was King Kong.
Closed captioning provided by. This is America's Court with Judge Ross. America's Court is back with the case of Norman Lamar, who is suing Walter Cowan for racial discrimination.
The jungle bunny is problematic. Because again, if you're not are you familiar with that term, Mr. Cohen?
I am.
All right. Were you familiar with that term prior to this incident?
Yes, and in fact, again, after interviewing all of the staff at my restaurant, basically, apparently the server had overheard Mr. Lamar's child discussing a new bunny that they had gotten, and so the attempt was to tie that in.
Was there do you have a bunny?
Absolutely not, Your Honor. We were sitting at the table.
No, I'm just asking, do you actually own a bunny?
No, Your Honor.
It was a stuffed bunny.
We don't
It was a new
own
stuffed
bunny.
bunny.
My daughter's 12 years old. She doesn't have a stuffed bunny.
Okay.
And then on top of that, Your Honor, I looked down at the placemat, and on the placemat it has a depiction of a picture from the 1800s. And in the picture there's a mob of white people, and in the corner it has the execution and lynching of a black male. And it says in the bubble print, as if it's a cartoon, well, only thing I said is I don't like gumbo. Now, that was too much of a coincidence.
This is the other image that I'm looking at right now.
Yes, Your Honor.
And this was where exactly?
This was a part of the table's placemat. So immediately when I saw that...
Because I see that you provided me a picture of a table.
Yes, the table that you're looking at
it has different photos. And,
exactly.
And
all of this is contracted out by a third-party restaurant decor company.
Was this just on your table, sir?
This was on all of the tables, Your Honor. This was throughout the entire restaurant.
All of the tables are alike, Your Honor.
Now, on top of that, so when I saw that, my daughter, she started crying immediately. My son, he was angry. My wife, of course, well, naturally, I'm going to get upset. So I stood up, I pulled the waiter to the side, and when I stood up to pull the waiter to the side to tell him how offensive it was, instead of him going to get the manager like I asked, he started beating his chest like he was a gorilla, like he was King Kong. So at that point, I got a little louder. And the next thing I hear is from one of the patrons, who are those ghetto people in the restaurant? So it got to a point where it went from trying to deal with a situation and point out something that was extremely racially sensitive to me, embarrassing me in front of my family, traumatizing my kids, to the point where I felt like I was ready to have to fight him up. So immediately, I took my family, I left, and before I left out, Ms. Higgins, who was a witness here today, she came outside, and she was there with her brother.
This is here? Ms. Higgins, step forward.
Coming up on America's Court.
You followed behind him for what purpose?
Because he definitely needed the support. No one was going to him to help this man or his family. He was completely humiliated, and I felt like something needed to be done, and if he ever needed to take legal action, I wanted to be there.
Closed captioning provided by... This is America's Court with Judge Ross. America's Court is back with the case of Norman Lamar, who is suing Walter Cowan for racial discrimination.
What was it exactly that offended you as it related to Mr. Lamar?
What was abnormal was that they kept badgering him afterward. Like they continued to embarrass him in front of his whole family.
Okay. How far were you in relation to where he was sitting, Mr. Lamar and his family?
About where this other desk is here.
All right, so somewhere between 10 to 15 feet.
Yeah.
Okay, pretty close. And were you there alone or were you with a party?
I was with my brother.
Okay. And had you already been there when you saw the Lamar family come in?
Yes, I was already seated.
And I take it you were going to be leaving prior to them because you would have already either been waiting for your food or had finished your food at some point?
Yeah, we were having drinks and appetizers, so we had a lot of time to spend. So.
And after you saw Mr. Lamar experience what you observed, at some point did he leave the restaurant?
Mr. Lamar, he left really shaken up, and I witnessed the whole thing.
And then what did you do?
I followed after him. I was so insulted. I never felt that way before, ever.
You followed behind him for what purpose?
Because he definitely needed the support. No one was going to him to help this man or his family. He was completely humiliated, and I felt like something needed to be done, and if he ever needed to take legal action, I wanted to be there.
Judge Ross's verdict when America's Court returns. You're watching America's Court with Judge Ross. This is America's Court with Judge Ross.
All of this is circumstantial evidence of some sort of discrimination. So I have to look at each of these things individually and then look at them collectively. So if I'm looking at the rude behavior, well, that's consistent with the restaurant. If I'm looking at the hats, well, everyone's wearing those hats. If I'm looking at the mommy versus mammy, I could see, if in cursive, that could be confusing. Now, the Jungle Bunny issue, that's a little problematic.
Sure. And the problem
Even as it pertains to the picture of the person being hung, the picture is so far away. I have seen images of black men that have been lynched and burned, and crowds around them. I have seen them. They are very disturbing, and yet they are very powerful from a standpoint of, this is what people like me and you, sir, had to endure in this country.
Yes.
When I look at this picture here, I don't have a sense of the context other than there's a group of people and there's a picture of someone. The fact of the matter is, in this country, people were hung, they were executed for legitimate criminal offenses. It is very difficult unless you are just, intent. It's a black and white blurred picture from 1800, and I can't even make out the race of the individual. And if it's on every table, I can't imagine that it was, in other words, if they said, we're going to seat you at this table with this image, well, then I could say, well, maybe that's more of a, not so much a coincidence. But if every table has this image, then that's not necessarily anything particular to you. So out of all the things that I heard, ghetto, that's somebody else. Mammy, mommy, I can let that go. This image, the only issue that I really have is the question of the term Jungle Bunny. And that is clearly an offensive term to African Americans, and really should be an offensive term to anyone who's sensitive to the fact that I may not be Asian, but I know when I hear a derogatory term towards someone Asian, or someone Jewish, or someone Italian, or someone Latino. I have enough sensitivity, but not everyone has that. So if I'm looking at what is your damage, you're saying to me that your children were damaged. I believe you said you think that there's therapy, they're having nightmares, anger management, and I'm sitting here going, you couldn't have been here more than 10, 15 minutes. You sat down, you had a bad experience, you left. And all of this resulted to the tune of $5,000. Do you have proof that there are these issues with anger management and nightmares? Do you have any evidence to support that? Do you have any bills regarding medication or doctor's visits or anything?
Well, Your Honor, that's...
Do you have those things?
No, Your Honor, I don't have any bills.
I need to be able to connect the dots.
I understand.
Based on the evidence and the testimony before this court. The gavel has to come down in favor of the defendants in this case. Is there racism? Is there discrimination? Is there prejudice? Have I experienced it? Absolutely. In this particular case, in order for me to award you monies, I have to at least connect that to something. Therapy sessions. She missed school. We had to take her to the doctor. My wife is in therapy right now. I need to see something, sir, and I don't have that. Unfortunately, your matter's dismissed. Case closed.
All rise.
Judge Ross has ruled in favor of the defendant. The plaintiff's claim is dismissed.
I'm in the business of providing positive dining experiences, and it's cases like these that let me know that it's time to make improvements within my business.
Yes, I feel like the judge's decision was based strictly on the law, but I hope that Mr. Cowan now realizes that he needs to be more sensitive to cultural issues such as this.
Follow America's Court on Facebook and Twitter. This has been a production